Because, of course, the Nephilim, the offspring of the Nephilim, rule the world. They are the elites behind the Tudor dynasty. They're the elites behind the governments and religious edifices today. But they have also not particularly liked it on our planet. Yeah. And the end game involves them trying to, of course, get off. It turns out that that's very difficult. In the book, I explain how there's a shield around the earth. That it's known in the religious and ancient texts. It's an encircling barrier that prevents the children of the Nephilim from leaving. Now, this is a mythological anecdote, so it is obviously not going to be, it's going to come as a shock to a lot of people, but that's why nobody has gone beyond the moon. You can go to the moon, but you cannot go beyond it, not if you have the alien DNA. That is a preventative barrier to keep the earth in quarantine. That's why they talk about the beast being chained to the pit, and there's many other mythologies that talk about the internment on the earth. They don't mean in the earth necessarily, they mean on the earth itself being kept in a state of quarantine, quote-unquote, while we resolve these spiritual issues. Now, the end game, as they're showing you through their movies like Stargate, as they're showing you through the movies like Enemy of the State and many of these other films that are coming out, they're getting closer and closer and closer to trying to find the key to get out. They made great strides with this in the 15th century. And again, they use magic as a cover. A lot of times when people are reading ancient occult books from the 15th century and think they're reading about, wizards and garrets and magical fraternities and all sorts of occult schools, they're not aware of what lies behind that. That behind Francis Bacon, behind Sir John Dee, behind Thomas Flood, and a lot of these other occultists, they were all working for the elite. They were all working for what was known as the invisible colleges to try and work on this Stargate problem, to try and break free. In fact, the silicon companies today, Genentech, SRI, MIT, they're still busy with it. Nothing has changed. They're still working on it. All of these think tanks and institutes, especially here in America, are carefully funded fronts for this exact kind of research to try and work with the silicon intelligence and the carbon in order to find the keys that will open the Stargate. Now, John Dee, for people who don't know, was one of the most important figures of medieval history. He was the astrologer to Queen Elizabeth I, and he was put in charge of this. He had the biggest collection of books in the world at that time. His house was on the Thames River. He was a master occultist, and he decided to open doorways, open spiritual portals to higher souls. So rather than just work with the human intelligence, he decided to go into his occult. He had many abilities with occult language and occult powers, and he opened what were called portals to oversouls. Now, these are not necessarily higher spiritual beings, but they are spiritual beings. They exist on higher planes. I know people find this a bit difficult to understand, but think of the microbes. If somebody hadn't invented a microscope for you to see an entire ecostructure and ecoculture of microbes, you would be taking people down and burning them if they said that there was a whole ecostructure of microscopic life forms. Now we know through a simple device like the microscope that such beings exist. Well, on the level above the human, there are what is called the macrobes. Now, in the pact with John Dee, the Tudor dynasty, and so forth and so on, with these macrobes said, yes, they do have a key. And that key of how to get free from this planet would take many hundreds of years for them to be able to even digest. For human intelligence to even put it into operation would take a very, very long time. I go into this in the book. But that's not all. The macrobes don't work for free.
Yes.
Higher agencies don't work for free. And John Dee, was basically in a situation saying, well, what is it that you want in this pact? You're going to give me something, I have to give you something. And what they wanted was energy. Energy released from death. Ritual murder, it has to do with cortisol, it has to do with the spiritual and occult properties of blood, the release of fear, the release of confusion, toxicity. These ritual deaths, as I labor in the book to explain, and also in my DVD, we go into this, on the Atlantis DVD that's coming out in January, there's a lot of information on this, that these ritual killings have to be done extremely specifically, otherwise it doesn't qualify as a ritual death. That means that they have to be done at the right time, and I mean that astrologically speaking. They have to be done at the right place on the globe, and they have to be done, there's other rules and regulations that go into these kinds of deaths. Wars, for instance, are ritual mass murders. The soldiers are covered in occult symbols, like the Pentagon in your country is an occult symbol. They're put out on certain parts of the globe. They'll fight one another and die in mass rituals under very ritualistic circumstances, by the way. And I mean that even for this latest Gulf War.
Yeah.
In both Gulf Wars, there's been ritualistic heavily. There's some people who specialize in this, that the troops are being asked to do some of the most weirdest things and dress in certain ways and perform in certain ways that are extremely bizarre. There's a ritual component very much to this war. That's why it's even in the Holy Land, in Iraq, which was the center of civilization. There's a reason why that positioning is being used. But all done through time. Richard Hoagland has done much work on this, talking about the 30 and the 33rd meridian of the Earth. I've got a large section on that in my book about get to find out why most of the bombs of the world are dropped on the 30th and 33rd meridian of the Earth, why most of the royal houses, why most of the churches and banks are all on this little part of the Earth, why Kennedy's assassination and many other murders are done, why many what we think of as serial killings have between 7 and 13 victims and are done on certain positions of the Earth. All of this has to be explained now to the human race, because this releases certain kinds of energy at certain kinds of time. And this is then used by higher energies in payment for this pact. And see, you talked about the cities. I discovered in my researches that cities, what we know as cities, that's a Latin word, are actually nothing more than ritual centers. So when you start talking to me earlier on about the design of Austin, my God, we're not talking just here about one statue, or somebody's listening right now from, St. Louis, or somebody's listening from New York. We're not just talking about your famous one statue. We're talking about the entire layout of your city. Take a look. Go one day with educated eyes and look at the carvings and the mosaics. Or if you haven't got time to do that, just buy David Oveson's book, Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, and he'll do the work for you. He found 22 zodiacs secreted into the architecture of Washington, D.C., and hundreds of astrological and zodiological symbols. Now, why would that be? Why would men who are our founding fathers, pretending to be Christian, but we know now that they're, of course, very Masonic, why would these people who laugh and tell you that you can't be involved in divination and mysticism, and that you shouldn't touch astrology, and that's off limits to you, but they can go and design their entire cities, and every ritual and everything that they do is based on it? If that isn't a divide and rule strategy, I don't know what is.
Yes.
So our cities are nothing more than ritual centers. Pick up the book, my book, Atlantis, and you will find the information in there. Very, very important information. There's a chapter in that book called Serpents in the Streets. And people need to know about the streets and the houses and the design of cities, and there's a reason, there's an occult pattern. Because in normal satanic ritual, you take your victim to a particular ritual site. Well, listen, you can't take the whole human race, perpetually to sacred sites for ritual death. Better still, put them in it. Build it around them. They'll never know the difference. Murders and assassinations will be happening. Gangs and all sorts of nonsense will be happening. Strangest obelisks and the weirdest occult symbols will be right in plain view. Like Sherlock Holmes used to say, put it in plain view, nobody will see it. Absolutely, that is what has been done. And then we wonder why we're frustrated and why our lives aren't working the way we want and why our children are delinquent. My God, if we only knew the prison universe that we're in, prison planet, and then even the prison cities. We got to know our enemy here.
We're all busy helping them get off this planet.
Busy getting off the planet. Exactly. We are the tools. And, as my book says, I don't really like our fate too much, if and when, because I have 4 outcomes, in the book. I'm not sure they'll get off, but, they may very well do. But in any of the 4 instances that I outline in the book, we are in pretty much a bad state. We're in a bad state now. Nature's in a bad state now. Yeah. And for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, this power elite kept our fathers in a state of total illiteracy, a total feudal state of slavery, in which it was illegal for you to even travel 5 to 10 miles from your village. So today, people, come to conferences, they email me, they read the book, and then they say, listen, how can some secret society just come in and take over? First of all, I didn't say that. What I'm talking about here is not just some secret society like some mafia coming in and taking over and ruling our lives. I'm talking about that these guys run the matrix of the world. These people have built our cities, they've created our schools, they've created our institutions. When we were serfs in fields, couldn't even read, these people were billionaires. These people had profited from the pillage of the world, These are the Nephilim, the descendants of the Nephilim we're talking about here. They created our farms, our villages. They created the lifestyles that our forefathers knew, who sweated in the mines and sweated in the fields and died wondering what the big mystery is. They give us fake religion. They give us no justice. You see?
Yes.
The appalling legacy of crimes. They've given us world wars, and then they tell us the next war is the war to end all wars. They've got us so turned around with doublespeak that we can't even tell when our leaders are leading us down to selling our sovereignty. You know, this country was strong and brave and upright 200 years ago. I'm from Ireland, you know, so I hate to say it. I hope I'm not offending anyone, but my God, what has happened?
Most of us listening here today agree.
You know, what has happened to you? You know, before you took the biggest tyrant that the world knew and you kicked his ass back into the Atlantic Ocean where he belonged, King George III and all his minions, a mere 3% of this country, told him where to go. And now, through decadence and yuppiness and apathy, and everybody shivering under their bed in fear, you've got these petty tyrants, people who are not even worth anything. But they're ruling from above with their private institutions and private banks that even in your Constitution says, to hell with it, it shouldn't exist. My God, what kind of travesty has happened? You know, and that's why there's a call to arms. We are being shot at.
Yes.
Our liberties are being taken away. There is no time to wait. You know, if you see a dangerous snake coming into your house to bite your children, you don't sit around and hum and ha and say, well, hold on, let me think about it. What's the rights of this snake? And let me get into the political pigsty and try something, you know, how to do it. You act.
Everybody wants to go back to the old ways. They're always talking about, you know, going back to the forefathers, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution. But now all of these documents, I feel, were written by these secret societies. Well, I know they were.
That's exactly right. And you see, as I said at the conference last year, somebody asked that exact question, and I said, look, if you don't have the moral constitution inside, what the hell does another document matter?
Yes.
You have to be a walking constitution. You have to have morality inside yourself. You have to be able to be connected to your source and have a clean, healthy psyche. Because if you're, you know, we clean everything in our world. We clean our driveways, our cars, our plates. We clean our beds, we clean our bodies, but we don't clean our emotions. We don't clean our psyche. So we're really in a bad state psychologically. And that's why we project these kinds of demagogues to rule over us. You're absolutely right. These Masonic guys knew that it's not going to be easy to get the people of the world from the old Europe over here to push the machine in America. So you're going to have to make some really glowing documents to make it all worthwhile. And people fell for it because situations in Ireland, like with the famine and the rest of the world, was so atrocious. It's the old dialectic. You make things so bad over there, and then you make things so attractive over here, and everyone will come over. And that's exactly what happened. But has anyone actually been free? Don't the Skull and Bones and the Russell Trust own every inch of this country from day one? What's free about America?
Nothing.
You turn a blind eye, and even with good presidents trying to prevent it, next thing you know, you have private banks on the soil of America. Next thing you have is duplicitous presidents like Roosevelt sending brothers to, you know, die in the fields of foreign wars on which he has no place being, when the country's a fledgling country which needs to stick to its own sovereignty and look to its own borders and strengthen itself. On the web stream program that I have on my website, I talk about this, how the British government knew that when they had lost the war, you know, when they couldn't fight America through force of arms, that doesn't bother them. They've got 100 other strategies to come in and weaken the country. They sent other agents in surreptitiously, and the American people need to know about this to find out the war has never gone over. Here you have your president shaking hands with the Queen of England and with Blair. Mm-hmm. Who in history was America's greatest enemy that they should be now happy, drooling at the mouth to be shaking the hands of the British? The British is America's greatest enemy.
Okay.
And all your presidents work for the City of London and the Freemasons of London, they do not work for American people or American justice. They're here to sink their fangs into this country and rape it, because they knew that after America had won the War of Independence, the Tsar of Russia was looking favorably on America and was thinking very, very much so about turning his Russia, you see, basing it on the American model. That's absolutely historically documented fact. You can read this in the work of the greatest Russian scholars like Alex de Jong, that the Tsar was so impressed with what America was doing. They were admiring this country's model, and were thinking of basing it on that. Other countries were thinking of doing the same. The French were thinking of doing it. Would you think that the British government and the Vatican who controlled the whole of South America with their false mind control religion, could allow America to be a glowing example, you see, of how a human being should live? That maybe the Tsar of Russia might even base his new government. He was just about to free all the peasants and let them base his government on an American-style model. Do you think that they could let all the thousands of years of control just fold up overnight like that? No. So they then worked overtime to bring this country down, and it's taken 200 years for them to do it. They've done it gradually.
Yes.
In this specific way that I talk about on the Origins of Evil web stream. People need to go to that site, check that out, read about it. Find out how your enemies are still in your midst through the Freemasons, people like Albert Pike and other minions like that, and Roosevelt.